Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Workplace Wonder. I'm Blake Cohen.
And I'm Kirby.
And as always, we are so excited to explore different workplace-related topics and discuss them with the experts in their respective fields. So today we have an incredible guest, and I am very excited to talk to you. I think we have some overlapping experiences here, and I think you have tons of great insights. So Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you both.
Thank you for being here. As always, we do ask our guests to introduce themselves. So if you want to give your version of today's bio, just to be more inclusive, please, we always make this attempt for people to do their own bios because we feel like how we feel about who we are shifts on a day-to-day basis. So we ask our guests to do their own bio. And Nina, I would love to hear who you feel like today.
Absolutely. So I am a speaker, researcher, and consultant on neuroscience, work-life balance, and burnout prevention. I work with organizations, teams, and people from all over the world, helping them use insights from neuroscience and management research to accomplish big goals without burning out. And as for me personally, a little bit outside of the science, I'm also a lover of fantasy novels, Latin dance, skating, biking, and really anything outside.
Okay. Are you Canadian?
I am Canadian.
Okay. Thought I heard the accent there. The oot.
Not many people catch that.
Yeah. I have an affinity for Canadians. I love all Canadians. Always
Do you
have.
hear that a lot, by the way? Do you ever hear people tell you that they love Canadians?
Yeah, they do sometimes.
Yeah, like my husband's like that too, and I just kind of just clicked that.
Well, I can tell you where it comes from for me. And I think this is where we talk about bias and how our childhoods shape us. Jim Carrey and Avril Lavigne. Jim Carrey was my favorite person ever, and I found out he was from Canada at an early age. And then Avril Lavigne was like my first real crush when I was a little boy. So,
Mm.
and she was Canadian. So the two of them just made me fall in love with Canada. And then I started learning more about it as I got older, obviously.
She's
But
from a town not far from here, actually.
oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
so I live in Ottawa, and she's from Napanee. That's a couple hours drive away,
the town's pride, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So just so that everybody knows, Nina and I started becoming friends. Was it Instagram or TikTok first? I can't remember.
I honestly don't know. I think it was probably Instagram.
Yeah, we became Instagram buddies and then TikTok buddies a few years ago because we both started our businesses at the same time. So it's been really fun to watch all the amazing things that you've made and how you've put your expertise out into the world. So I never thought in a million years that I would like collect these amazing people on something like TikTok, but it's been the most, I mean, even you, Blake, right? Like it's been such a nice little consequence of putting yourself out there is that you collect all these amazing minds around you.
I've gotten to meet some of the people that I've met on Instagram in person, speaking at the same conferences or events and stuff like that now too. It's so much fun. And it's neat too, because then I'll often find out that they know another person that I know because the number of people who are using Instagram and TikTok in particular to talk about workplace related topics is just not that many people.
Yeah.
So we're often able to connect over like, oh, you also know so and so? Like, yeah, of course. I've been following her for 2 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, it feels like a big world just because it's our world, but in reality, there's not that many people doing that type of content, or at least
Yeah,
doing it
awesome.
well.
Okay, I'm going to kick us off today because while I know you, Nina, and we have talked a lot, and it feels like we're besties at this point, just because this weird little universe that we live in, I don't actually know all of your story. So I'm really excited to hear about the origins of you and how you came into this field and all the insights and defining moments that got you here. So I want you to take us way back. Tell us a little bit about Nina and what got you to where you are today.
Gosh, it's been a lot of different things coming together over the years. And really my business and career and where I'm at now is this really cool amalgamation of personal experience, past jobs that I've had, and education and the research that I do. So from the kind of other career pieces so far, and I'll tie all these in for you together later, I've always loved speaking and presenting. I used to line up my stuffed toys on my bed as a child and give them TED Talks.
No
That was
way.
one of the, that was one of the things I did. And so I was a cycling coach at one point. So I got into kind of these leadership roles early on. I used to lead peer study groups in my undergraduate degree. And I later worked at Apple, which was a fantastic job. It was Apple Retail. And there, I eventually moved into a role as a workshop facilitator. So I used to be the person that would teach classes on how to use your iPhone, how to do iPhone photography, drawing on the iPad, stuff like that. So I had this huge love for workshop facilitation, public speaking, that kind of thing. So that's one of the pieces that came into where I am now. The other was, of course, my education. I did my bachelor's in neuroscience and mental health, thinking that I was going to go into sports performance research. That's how I wound up in that degree in the first place. I had read an article while I was sitting in the waiting room at the dentist, of all places, on how neuroscientists were working with professional athletes to improve performance. And I was like, I think I want to do that. So I went and signed myself up for a neuroscience degree. And during my degree, at one point, I took an elective in organizational psychology, and it completely shifted what I was interested in because at the time I was working for Apple, where they've done a really incredible job of using things from organizational psychology and organizational behavior. So it was like I would go to class, I would learn something, and then I would go to work and be like, oh my gosh, it's happening right in front of me. This is so cool. Based on that, I went on to do my master's in management, where my supervisor was like, hey, I think with your background being neuroscience and mental health, you should really take a look at burnout and stress management at work. I think these are topics that you'd be really good at researching. So I started pursuing my master's research, looking at how leadership impacts the way employees experience stress at work and their burnout levels. And I'm still pursuing that now in my PhD research, which I completely forgot to mention in my introduction. I'm doing a PhD. Surprise.
What's the degree?
I wasn't feeling that one today, apparently. I also have a bachelor's of neuroscience and a master's of management.
Wow.
So that was
Wait,
the second
what's the PhD? Org psych?
in management. It's in
Management.
management.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So my research is focused mainly on appraisal. So the way that people experience and perceive stressors at work differently. I study why people experience stress at work in different ways and what shapes those perceptions.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. I
So
love that.
that's the second piece. We have the jobs, the education, and the third thing was personal experience, lived experience with burnout. I didn't recognize it as burnout at the time because I hadn't yet done that research. But when I was in my bachelor's degree, a couple of years in, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. He went through chemotherapy. I had to pull back from courses, take less hours at work, drop all the volunteer projects that I was part of. And when he went into remission, rather than having any semblance of self-compassion whatsoever, I decided I was going to make up for lost time. I got approval from my department for a course overload. I went back up to full hours at work. I was all over the volunteer projects, but I had this amazing plan. I was like, well, I'm going to do yoga once a week, self-care, and it's all going to be okay. It was not okay. I burnt out. I was sick. I was tired. I was exhausted. I was
Yeah.
cranky. And it got so bad that I collapsed in my yoga class one week. I collapsed and I hit my head on the floor. So then I was burnt out and concussed. I had to take 7 months off of work, drop half of my courses.
Wow.
Yep, step back
7
from
months.
all the volunteer stuff, 7 months before I was able to start going back to just a couple hours a day of work and a couple of classes. And it was really during that return back to work and classes that my own perspectives around work and performance and stress started to shift, because I started looking to the neuroscience, the work that I was familiar with, to say, okay, how can I do things that I care about, accomplish goals that are important to me, but not go back to this place of collapsing.
Yeah.
So then that all came together with the research that I started doing in my master's degree. And when I finished my master's, we were in the midst of the pandemic, and people were saying, oh my God, burnout, what do we do? And I was like, I have personal experience with this. I've got the education, and I love speaking and workshop facilitation. So I started my business, and that's led into the work that I do now.
Like a perfect storm of a person out getting out there and educating others. Can I ask a question real quick, Kara? I saw your face starting to I'm just curious about the 7 months. So in that window of 7 months, are you obviously you're a high achiever, which oftentimes comes with you sort of filling every moment of your day with some type of work, school, family, whatever it is, yoga, you're doing all this stuff. What is going on in that 7 months, and what is the progression that's happening during that period mentally? How are you struggling with it? Taking those steps back, what does that look like for you?
So it was a very dark window, because in addition to the concussion symptoms, I also experienced post-concussion syndrome when that resolved, which comes with a lot of symptoms that are very similar to depression. So I was
Mm.
very down. I was just very hopeless. I was completely off of work, because working at the Apple store, very stimulating. Literally, the lights alone and like the shiny pictures are enough to
Yeah,
throw you for a loop when you have a concussion. So I was completely off work. I had dropped a couple of courses, but I was still registered in a few others. So I was plugging along at a few of my courses. My doctor actually told me later that their preference is that students completely would have dropped the courses. But he said, when we see students like you who are such high achievers, we've learned that the stress of having them withdraw from everything is actually worse,
Mm.
letting them finish some of their courses with accommodations. So I believe I was in 3 courses, and I had friends giving me notes, and I had extra time for exams. I wrote deferred exams for a couple of the courses. But so the doctors even have seen this pattern where they're like, these are, students who won't slow down, to the point where if we try to get them to slow down, it'll actually upset them more and make
sure.
things worse.
Hmm.
So I was still doing some courses. I got through a few of them. I fortunately was convinced to take the summer off completely. The biggest thing I remember from that time period, though, was being really consumed by this belief that I was never going to get better. And so I was trying to make plans for if that happened. I was trying to make contingency plans. I was looking into different career options. I was like, well, maybe I'll have to drop out of university and I could get, uh, a college program where I could do like scientific writing, because obviously I don't have enough brain cells to be a researcher anymore. Like I was really giving up during that phase. But at the same time, I was following the recommendations of my doctor and the other professionals that I was working with. So slowly but surely began to get better, and eventually was able to return to work and school. One thing that came out of that, though, was although I didn't have to adjust down to the point of dropping out of my degree entirely, when I went back to work and school, I did have to start being more selective about what I was committing to, because I had learned that I just couldn't do as much as I had been doing before. So it meant not saying yes to every single volunteer opportunity under the sun, every project, side hustle, whatever it may be. So that was fortunately an adjustment, where I started off by being like, well, you're going to be able to do nothing with your life, to being like, you know what, maybe you can't do all the things you thought you were going to do before, but you can still do a lot of really awesome things if you prioritize.
Uh, I mean, Wow, it's so crazy how individualized that whole journey is as people recover from burnout. But I do want to just, Kara, you laughed at a similar part when I laughed. It was when you were talking about how, Nina, you said you didn't know if you were ever going to be able to recover or get out of this. So you started planning. Kara, why did you laugh? Because I'm curious if it's the same reason I laughed.
In one of the things that I work with, there's this idea of paradoxical intent, right? So it's like if we live life trying to avoid our deepest fears, then our deepest fears end up coming true. So, like in layman's terms, we get in our own way a lot of times. And so, I know you, and even hearing your story, it concretes it and even more that high achievers, it's like you have a high achiever and they're going through something that is shaking their identity, which is one of the hardest humans experiences. And instead of letting yourself rest to get through it, you make plans of how this horrible outcome is going to happen, and thereby by making those plans you're probably hurting yourself even more. And it's just I imagine there's so many people that have like the similar drive to you that relate so deeply to that story.
Hmm.
Oh, and you're so right. I was definitely on the computer way more than I should have been, like looking at different career paths. I
That
was
was what
not
made me
supposed to be on the screen.
That's what made me laugh was that, well, there's sort of an irony in what you're saying, in that like this idea that I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get past this. So I'm going to start researching other possible career paths that I can go down. And like you don't even realize that what you're doing is getting past it. But in that moment, it felt like a better contingency plan. Somebody who's struggling in that moment and who doesn't have hope for the future isn't going to be able to do that planning for the rest of their life. So your high achiever still came through, and there was signs that you were going to be okay while you're planning for not being okay. If that does that make
That
sense
was
what I'm
real.
saying?
Yeah,
Totally.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I after I had my first son, I was in like postpartum, and I was experiencing these really strange things that I had never experienced before. But one of the things that happened is that I lost access to my memory. So like I had lived my life being able to recall things really easily. Like I could read a book and tell you what's in that book, right? I had lost that. And I wonder if that's kind of like the same thing, right? Like you
Mm.
live your life being able to say, well, I can just recall all these different things and my brain works really fast and I can synthesize these things. But when you lose that, you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? Instead of being like, this will come back someday, because it's unsettling. It's like it was like this one of the scariest things I've ever been through.
That's
Yeah,
weird. Like,
that was exactly what it's like. And with the double whammy of concussion and
yeah.
burnout, it was just so hard to see a way out. And when you even just have like a really bad cold for a couple days or something, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't remember what it feels like to breathe through your nostrils anymore.
Yeah.
It's like that, but for months at a time where I'm like, I can't remember what it's like not to be in pain and
Ugh.
emotionally exhausted from the burnout. I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel at all. And in my case, very much like what you were saying, my intelligence was such a big part of my identity, and not being able to do what I was used to doing cognitively, or even being able to like sit and read a book was like, well, I guess we're done for. Like, that's
I'm not that cool. I don't really have a
yeah.
backup plan. I'm just kidding. We
Yeah.
all are.
It feels like a very humbling process, that there's some grieving that you're going through as well. Grieving, or maybe recognizing that you're not superhuman, and that there's these limits. And I think as humans, no matter what, we don't like to believe that we have those limits. And they're humanizing in a positive way, but they're also humbling in another way too, that you kind of have to eat a little bit of humble pie there and recognize, okay, I went too far. I've got to take a few steps back. What does my future look like? And I think that's where, for me, I know that I would be concerned, is that, okay, now I had this strict plan of what my life was going to look like. Now there's uncertainty mixed in there, and I don't know what it's going to look like. And that scares me.
It's funny that you say superhuman because a really important cue that I use for myself now, and I talk to my clients about this too, to recognize when I'm at capacity is when I start setting superhuman
Mm.
expectations for myself.
Ooh, tell us
Yeah.
more. What does that mean?
So for me, it looks typically like saying things like, okay, I can do all of this as long as nothing goes wrong.
Mm.
Or I'll be looking at my schedule or like transition periods, especially, and I'll be like, all right, I'm strong enough, I'm smart enough, I can do it. I just got to push through. And I've learned to catch those moments and say, okay, those are superhuman expectations. You are setting goals, making plans based on just being able to push yourself more and to not have anything go wrong, to not have a bad day, to not get sick. That's not what's going to happen. The uncontrollable, the unexpected things evolve, things go wrong. So I've learned to recognize that if I'm making plans that way, then I clock that as superhuman expectations for myself. And that's when I have to sit down and really reevaluate what I'm doing, what my goals are, what the boundaries are, and what my new structure is going to be
Mm,
moving forward.
Oh, that's so smart.
yeah.
I'm
Interesting.
gonna, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna like put that on a post-it and put it on my computer.
So it's
Yeah.
part of a bigger acronym that I use with my consulting clients. I call it the REST method, REST. And this is my process for accomplishing big goals without the burnout. R is recognizing when you're at capacity. So in my case, superhuman expectations, but I'll work with people and coach people to identify other markers too. For some
Okay.
people, it's things like the moving finish line where you're constantly saying, I just need to make it till the end of the month. I just need to make it till the end of the quarter. I just need to, I just, and that's never going to happen. But for other people, recognizing their capacity is things like, I just ordered Uber Eats 6 times this week. I'm not okay. So there's some personal variation in there.
That's
The
funny.
E in that acronym is explore your energy. I think a big mistake that a lot of people make these days is looking at time without energy.
Mm.
Our work is so demanding. We have the technology and the resources available to do work that is so energetically and cognitively demanding of us that we really can't be scheduling out our days based on the time blocks that we have available. We also have to be looking at how we're using our energy. And for high achievers, making sure we're using it on things that actually matter and contribute to our goals versus the unnecessary, like maximizing. I use the example of in Canadian grading system. This example doesn't translate that well for Americans, but in the Canadian grading system, 90% and above is an A plus. So if you get 92%, you're good. You've got it. High achievers spend a lot too much time trying to get that other 8% to be at 100, and it's not going to make any difference
Ugh.
whatsoever.
You are
Oh my
attacking
God.
me. You
I
are,
feel
this
like
is,
you
Hack
need
this
to leave me
acronym.
this is
alone.
bullshit. Okay. I hate this.
Well, the S
I,
is a little bit gentler. So the S in rest is to set boundaries. And when I'm going through this with teams, with clients, the biggest thing I want people to understand about setting boundaries is that when you've set a boundary well, you're able to communicate with other people.
mm,
It means you can talk, not that you've like hidden behind a wall and now you're just
Mhm.
not going to speak ever again, which really doesn't work in the workplace. Like we can't be like, you know what? I hate you. Too bad.
Yeah, that's great.
And finally, the T in that acronym is take care of yourself, making sure that we're prioritizing swimming, dancing, socializing, reading, whatever those things are that make us feel good. Because at the end of the day, all of the things that we know are good for us, that you've heard a million times, like go for walks, talk to your friends, those things aren't just good for us. They are the super fuel for your brain to recharge your resilience, give you oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, make you happier, more motivated, more creative. And that's going to make everything else about your life and accomplishing your goals all that much easier.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, what a great, like a great framework that you've put together. And I feel like it really covers all the different spots. We have to go back to the grading thing about the 92 and the 8
Yes,
point.
I thought we
Uh,
might.
so one of my professors in the first semester, right? And I think this is the weed out class, right? So like I think every doctoral program has like that weed out class. And this guy is there to scare us, although I ended up loving him. He's my favorite professor. But he basically talks a lot about perfectionism and then imposter phenomenon and how it brings that to burnout quite a bit. But he said one of the quotes that he had in one of his lectures is something that I've just held on to. He goes, every student perfectionist that I have claims they've overcome perfectionism until they get a 99 out of 100. And then
Oh,
the
yeah.
perfectionist shows up. And he has been so accurate this entire time. Even a month ago, I was fighting my professor for 1 point. I got 1 point off, and I'm like, you made a mistake. You need to check this. Like, I did include what you said. You misinterpreted it. And we luckily have a good relationship. So he wrote back something very kind and was like, bud, you've got a 98 in the class right now. You're doing just
You
fine.
need to calm down.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is not the thing to spend your energy on.
Yeah, but it's so funny how we think we're better in those areas until we get challenged. And if everything's going perfectly, we think we've overcome perfectionism. Then something goes wrong and we're like, I still have work to do.
This is what I see all the time with type A perfectionism, people pleasing, like any of those high achieving patterns. And I'm always telling people now that we're not trying to get rid of type A perfectionism or people pleasing. We're just trying to find really good strategies that let
Hmm.
us work with those patterns. Because at some point, you also don't want to erase your whole personality. Like, we don't have to get rid of everything that makes
Sure.
us us. But if you think you're healed from type A perfectionism, you got another thing coming when things go wrong in your life.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Kara.
No, I would like your insight on this because I just have this idea that's bubbling around and it's not founded in science besides observation. But I think like us and Blake, you can chime in on this too because I only know little girls' lived experiences. But I think that a lot of young women were raised on this idea that like the more that you achieved, if you made perfect grades, you'll be able to get in this college. And once you have this degree, you'll be able to get the life that you want. And right now, we're at this divide where that social contract isn't really coming through. And so it's like you have all these people who have been told this message their entire life that have been literally killing themselves their entire life to be perfect. And now they're at an impasse where they're not getting exactly what they want. I don't know. Like, does that go into some of this as well? Like, do you see that?
I see it too, and I don't have data on it specifically, but I do see that in my work and the people that I'm working with. I think the rise of marketing everything and
Mm,
capitalism has really done us some disservices here because one of the things that I see with the education piece, for example, is there is that expectation of like, oh, I did the degree, therefore I get this. And to be fair, some universities and colleges have really positioned it that way.
mm-hmm,
That is not what they were originally designed for. Universities and colleges are for education, and education is not a guarantee for a job, but that has become kind of more of the messaging of being like, oh,
Hmm.
well, come do this program and you'll get this. But that's not actually what universities or colleges are teaching people. Those are not job training programs. They're
mm,
higher education, where what you're meant to be learning is how to learn and how to think critically. They're not job training programs, and yet they're sometimes being marketed and talked about as if they are. So then people go to university and now they have these amazing critical thinking skills and maybe media literacy or scientific background or whatever it is. And they're like, well, I was promised a job, but the program and that promise are not the same thing.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've never thought of it that way.
I'm kind of letting that absorb. And but yeah, I mean, I agree. And it seems like the higher of education you go through, the more that expectation exists. I'm like, okay, if I go all the way for the doctorate, there's going to be at graduation, there's going to be a recruiter for some incredible job standing outside and just handing me a welcoming check, and saying, here you go, you got a job because you've got a degree. And there is a lot that goes into it afterwards. I'm curious from your personal perspective, as somebody who is speaking and who is working and also getting a PhD, which is enormously taxing on our brains, how do you now prevent burnout with doing all of that? Because you're already doing more than most humans can handle at one time.
Yeah, that's very fair. So, first and foremost, it is using all of the strategies that I'm talking about. So, when I talk about things like the REST method, that's how I set up my life. I sit down with myself to evaluate my own plan and go through my own worksheets with myself regularly, especially when I'm starting to see overwhelm. So, anything that I'm teaching in workshops and consulting work with my clients, I do for me to the point of being like really annoying for myself sometimes because there's nothing worse than when you're like kind of having a rough week or something and you're like, okay, what would I tell my clients? And then you're like, I would tell them this and I would give them this advice and I would say, you need to go do this. And so then you go do that thing and you're like, I feel so much better. Like, I can't believe
Yep.
that worked. That's so annoying.
Yep.
But so
Sometimes I just want to wallow.
right? Like going outside and getting sun and organizing my to-do list was helpful. Ugh, the worst. But it does work. So I use a lot of the strategies that I teach on myself. And then the other thing that is a really big piece of this that is where I do want to be careful with giving this advice of like, oh, you just have to use this method. I have a really good program fit. So that matters to make everything that I'm doing
Mm.
possible.
Mhm.
My department for my PhD is incredibly supportive of the work that I do. I actually started in a different PhD program and it wasn't working. I could
Mhm.
not do both. And I left after the first semester and transferred to a new program where I was a lot more upfront about what I wanted to be doing, that I wanted to be doing consulting and speaking while doing the PhD. And they've been fantastic. I'm 3 years in and I haven't done a single teaching assistant job. They're not asking me to do some of the extras that other graduate students are doing because they know that I have the business and that I have that other source of income. So I don't necessarily need kind of all the odd jobs that graduate students are typically doing. So they've been just incredibly supportive. My
That's awesome.
supervisor, even she referred me to an event that I spoke at in October. So they're not just letting me do it, they're actively supporting and encouraging what I'm doing. And all of my research and consulting work is on the same topics. So
Yeah.
that helps a lot too.
Yeah, you hear a lot of horror stories, so it's probably, I mean, it's good for people to hear that there's not people out there just like gatekeeping and breaking
Mhm.
people down and doing all those weird stories that you hear about sometimes.
Oh, yeah, especially with grad school. I would say my first go at the PhD was one of those stories. The first semester was not the right fit at all, but I just looked at it and I was like, this is 5 years. Like a PhD is
Good for
5 years.
you.
It's a long time. And I was like, I did this because I thought it was going to be fun. So if I'm not having fun, I'm going to switch it up. And I got out of there and started at a different program. So I'm at Concordia now. They're in Montreal. I'm based in Ottawa. I did live in Montreal for a little bit, but now I'm doing it remotely. And it's been fantastic. It's been a really good fit.
It's
There's
awesome.
there's a lot that you said that resonates, and I think that makes a ton of sense for because you can't help but compare it to your own life, right? And so doing my doctorate now, I think part of the reason why, yes, it's exhausting, yes, it's a lot of reading. So there's a lot of mental energy that goes into it, but it doesn't feel depleting. It almost feels like it's filling my cup in another way because I'm excited about the material, excited about the learning. So it does feel a little bit different. Obviously, I'm sure you have it too. There's those weeks where you're just like, what is going on? This is so much. But there's like a pride and a growth that comes along with it as well that it kind of has the opposite of effect of burning out. And plus, if you're in an institution that values you, that's very value aligned, and we all take care of each other, it's also not as taxing at that.
It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
or it's taxing in different ways that you're then excited about and willing to do what you need
Yes.
to manage the experience. Because grad school is always going to be hard, but we want it to be like hard math and hard
Mhm.
papers to read through, not hard bureaucratically wrong fit,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It's funny you say that, and we're discussing this too, because that ties in a lot to what I study, actually. So, the framework that my research is based on is challenge hindrance, and this idea that we can perceive and praise the demands that we're encountering in our jobs as either challenges that we can
Mm,
overcome, that we can rise to, or hindrances that are going to get in our way, hold us back, and thwart our progress towards our goals. With hindrances, there's really no psychological benefit. You don't get anything from that. You're just inconvenienced, stressed, and exhausted at the end of the day. Whereas with challenge stressors, there's a lot of psychological benefits. It's very motivating, it's very empowering. We like being challenged, we get to learn and grow. But with both of them, challenge and hindrances, no matter what your perception is of the demands, we still have the same risk for burnout, and both are still forms of strain. It's just that when there's challenges, now we're also getting a payoff. So as long as we
Mm.
can take care of ourselves and not overdo it with what we're taking on, there is a lot of benefit and a lot of reward to doing work that we're excited about.
Is this the eustress versus distress? Like, is this sort of stemming from
It's
that
connected.
idea?
Yeah. So the primary theory that underlies my research is called the transactional theory of stress. And so
Mm.
it basically says we're going to interpret things as either a challenge or a threat based on a combination of our personal experiences and information about our environment. And that framework is based on work that came before it, which includes things like stress and eustress and other theories of motivation and stress research that then evolved into uh, more modern theories. And then there's other theories that were based off the transactional theory of stress. And it all keeps going. We're always coming up with new ways to try to explain what it feels like to be a person.
I have a question for you. I want you to spill a little bit of tea if you don't mind. Let's go. What do you think? So there's a lot of people calling themselves burnout coaches right now, right? I like reposted one of your posts today, and I feel like that's the same thing in the leadership world. It's like, all right, everyone, calm down. What do you think that people get wrong when it comes to burnout?
I think the biggest thing that I see, there's a lot. They got a lot wrong.
I
But
know. I want to
actually,
hear. I want to hear it all. I want the tea.
the kind of umbrella that I'm going to go with, though, is attributing burnout to one thing or the other
Mm,
between personal or work related factors. A lot of the burnout coaches that I see online have picked a side. They've said burnout is entirely a personal problem. It's because you are a perfectionist, because you
Mhm.
have these mindset patterns that you need to break.
interesting.
You are doing all of this. And then there's other people who have picked the other side and they're like, it's corporations, it's systems, it's capitalism. That is the only problem. And that's where they go. The research does not support that. What the research very consistently says is it's both. And when we look at research on return to work after burnout, we can even see it break down into specifics. So there's three dimensions of burnout: exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced professional efficacy, where you lose your motivation and your
Mm,
interest in work. The personal well-being side of burnout is best addressed through, or sorry, is best at addressing emotional exhaustion.
mm.
The cynicism and reduced professional efficacy really need work related interventions when people are coming back to work. So it's both, because a lot of different things are true, right? If we think about the people who really focus on the environment entirely, one of the ones that drives me absolutely crazy is when people use the phrase of, if a plant isn't doing well, you need to move the plant. You need to get it new soil. It's not the plant's fault. People are not plants. Like people are not house plants. We
No,
are a
yeah.
lot more complicated.
Sometimes it is the person's fault.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So it's to me, it's like, okay, it's true that sometimes it's the environment and we need to fix the environment, but also people are not plants. And sometimes it's the person and it's the habits that they are approaching work with. I've seen it go both
Hmm.
ways within the same team, the same workshop. I once gave a full day training at a theater production company. At the end of the day, we were sharing the biggest takeaways for the day. And back to back, I had a woman stand up and say, the biggest thing I got out of today was that I need to take some responsibility for my well being. I have been blaming my job for everything, but I'm not doing any of the stuff we talked about for personal well being. Like, I'm not relieving stress. I'm not taking breaks. I'm not doing that, like all of it.
Mm.
The very next person who stood up was a man who said, what I learned today was that it's actually not all my fault. We as a team need to restructure the way that we do scheduling because there's no way any of us cannot be burning out with the way we have things set up right now. Same team, same workshop. One person's takeaway was, actually, this is my fault. And the other person's was, this is the organization. This is a team thing. We're going to have to deal with the work.
But both of those are true, right?
Exactly. Both of those
Okay,
are
okay.
true. Both of those are true. That's exactly what I want to see when I work with teams is people coming to whatever conclusion they need. But that is not what I see on the internet with burnout coaches. Burnout coaches
Hmm.
have typically picked one or the other, and they're going to say it's all your fault, or they're going to say it's all capitalism's fault. Much as it's fun to yell about capitalism, neither of those things are true. It was simply more complicated than that. It is the interaction between people and their environment
Mm.
that creates burnout.
It's almost,
I will say though, sorry, like,
go ahead.
is that I know I've told you about this before, but like I worked at really healthy organizations. So I did see people that would have these, I think that more often than not, you have horrendous corporate systems that are archaic, that are put into place that it's not like they're responsible for all burnout, but they're not doing anything to help with it. Right. So I would see a healthy system help people a lot. Right. Like they still would show up and they would have their baggage, but I wonder if it's not 50-50.
And I think it depends on the person and the organization.
Yeah.
Like it's not an even split. And that's why I say it's an interaction between the person and the environment. Because similar to you, I've seen both. I have declined to work with some organizations in the past where I'm like, you really have to fix these structural things. Otherwise, having me come in to work with your team is not going to make sense. But I've also worked with teams where they've set up really incredible options for their staff, flexible work, fantastic policies. And they're like,
Yeah.
yes,
Same.
and we've got people secretly working on Saturdays and we don't know how to stop them.
Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, yeah.
It's almost like it's a spectrum of like on one side, it's all your personal, who you are and how you operate, and then also there's the corporation on this side, and everyone falls on the spectrum somewhere of
Yeah.
which
And it's
what they need to treat.
exactly. But it is, I think, what gets missed most often online is that
Hmm.
nuance of saying,
Yeah.
okay, well, it depends. And sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that, which is a hard thing to convey on the internet for sure. But burnout coaches who have really like adamantly picked a side are uh, just, I think, sometimes taking it too far to one extreme.
I mean, it's a whole nother conversation that I want to get into there, but we don't have that much time. But I feel like that is a huge problem on social media is that people want a clear, concise answer. So they want to be
Hmm.
told, and they are just capitalizing on that fact that human beings want that clarity. When in reality, every single situation and person is unique and different, and they get to the point where they're at, and their burnout looks massively different depending on the person. I remember during orientation, like August 2 years ago, my my advisor sat down with me and she goes, okay, the first question I have to ask, and I'm writing and putting in your file, is what does it look like when you're burned out? And
That's good.
I gave her the answer of what I thought. Well, I'm tired, I'm cranky, I'm not getting my work. She goes, no, no, no. What does it look like when you're burned out? Not everybody, not what burnout
Mm.
looks like, what you think it looks like. And I had to give her, I had to think and give her that answer, which is usually really like really dark, self-deprecating humor all the time and acting like the world's ending, but in a funny way. That's usually means I'm on the verge, or I start Googling flights to Mexico in the middle of the night and to see how I can escape this world and be like, what happens if I take a one-way flight to Mexico? I learned that Croatia is really cheap to live in. I was looking up where the cost of living is the best with the dollar exchange with the US dollar. And I think Croatia was one of them. That's the stuff I started Googling when I was burned out.
Well,
And really,
that's
you
your
need,
R in
yeah.
the REST acronym, the recognize when you're at capacity. It's
Yeah.
Google cost of living in
Romania.
random countries at 2
Yeah.
a.m.
Yep.
That's when you know you're in trouble.
Yep. Like, what happens if I just escape it all now? Well, this has been a really very insightful conversation. So before we have to get off, is there any other areas that you want to touch on? Or if not, how can people find you? What's the web address? I'm going to put everything in the descriptions and the show notes. But just in case, where can people find you? Where would you like to direct them?
You can find me at my website, ninanesdoly.com. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, all the same name. So you can come connect with me on any social media platform. And on my website and through these platforms as well, you'll find that I have lots of free stuff, Burnout 101 ebook, burnout assessment for those of you working with teams who want to know how to start and what factors to address first. And you can also find information about booking me for speaking gigs, consulting work, or one-to-one sessions.
Amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank
Good
you,
guess,
Nina.
Kara.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
coming on. I like as soon as we started thinking about this, you were one of the first people that came to mind because I knew that this would be such a valuable discussion and sharing your wisdom with all the listeners out there. So I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
All right. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we will see you next week.